So my name is Liz.
I'm Charlie.
And we are joined by Ems, the director of NRICH, and a very warm welcome to you all. Before we get going properly, we'd just like to say thank you to Trinity College here in Cambridge for funding the webinars so that they're free for you to join. So many of you may have joined us before, which is fantastic, but that's certainly not a prerequisite. So you're very welcome if this is your first time too. We're going to give you a little bit of background, first of all, and then we're going to get going on some mathematics together. So I'm just going to share my screen and there we go. Hang on, I'm just going to let's share my web browser. Now I'm hoping that everybody can see the primary teacher homepage of NRICH. Now, some of you may know that we've had a bit of a revamp of our site recently, and this is so that we hope things on the website are better reflect the kind of framework that we have in mind as we're developing NRICH tasks. So we use the Kilpatrick, what we term the Kilpatrick rope model as we're creating tasks on NRICH. So this includes sort of 5 strands. So these are 5 elements of successful mathematicians. So 2 of those elements are about mathematicians having good conceptual understanding and procedural fluency. And if it's sort of that way into NRICH that you're interested in, then I would suggest the best place for you to go would be here to our curriculum linked problems. If I click on there, just to give you a overview, our curriculum mapping document is at the top, which is a really useful resource. And then you can see we've grouped tasks according to the curriculum area. So 2 of the strands of the 5 strands are about conceptual understanding and fluency. And then the 3rd strand, turning our attention to this box here, is about developing students' mathematical mindsets. So do they think that mathematics is worthwhile? Do they persevere? Are they resilient? Those kind of qualities, which are, of course, are essential to becoming a successful mathematician. I'm not going to go into any more detail on those now, but that's the 3rd element. And then our final 2 strands link to what we at NRICH are breaking down into this area called developing mathematical thinking. So let's click on there. The rope model that Kilpatrick puts forward suggests that students need to be good at adaptive reasoning and strategic thinking. So these are the kind of skills we need when we're faced with a problem that we've not seen before. Now here at NRICH, we've broken that down a little bit in the hope that this is more useful to you as practitioners on the ground. So if I just scroll down a little bit, you get a sense of what we've done is we've broken it down to 5 phases, if you like. So when you're first given a new problem, Charlie, you need to do a little bit of exploring, you need to get your hands dirty, that messy stage. So that's all about exploring and noticing. Then you might go on to do some more systematic working as you notice some particular patterns and you want to explore it in a more organised way. Having done that, you're then sort of noticing perhaps some structure, and that leads you to some conjecturing. It's good that I can't say that word this afternoon, isn't it? Some conjecturing based on some general thinking that you're doing. That is what we're going to focus on today. So of course, we're going to say a lot more about that. But just to give you a little sense, where we're going next is some visualizing and representing. And then finally, it's no use just conjecturing. As mathematicians, we want to be absolutely certain that what we're conjecturing is true or not true. And that's where our reasoning, convincing and proof comes in. So those of you who have joined us before, you may well be aware that we are currently on the 3rd out of a series of 5 webinars, each of those webinars linking directly to these 5 phases. So today, we're conjecturing and generalising, Charlie, and we are really going to try, as we've done in the previous 2, to focus on that 3rd phase of our our problem solving. So we're going to share with you a few tasks which we believe give really good opportunities for students to do some conjecturing and generalising themselves. We've also written some guidance, so we'll show you where you can find that. And we'll show you where we'll put this recording of the webinar. And although we're only going to have time to work on a few tasks this afternoon, rest assured we have created, we've gathered together lots of tasks that we hope you will find useful to work on with your learners. So let's not do any more talking. Well, I won't do any more talking. You've been very silent. We're going to do some maths, Charlie. Okay. So the first task that we're going to have a go at is one that some of you may know, but because of our focus on conjecturing and generalising, we're not going to give you a chance to do very much of the mathematics at first. So Charlie, this is a problem called magic V's. And I'd like us to imagine that we've worked on this task in our class. So Charlie, you're going to put yourself in the position of a student, a learner in my class, if you like. And our challenge has been to use the numbers 1 to 5 to create a V shape where the two arms of the V add to the same total. So Charlie, let's imagine that we've got to a stage where we've got some solutions. I wonder if we could share those solutions with everybody, please. So Charlie is going to share. I'm going to put the visualizer on.
Yeah, that's fine. That's what I'm question. Do you know for maths? We're not doing on old track anymore, are we?
So
just to reiterate what Liz was saying, we're not giving you a chance to explore the problem for yourselves, because that was the focus of a previous webinar, or to sort of approach the problem a little systematically, because again, that was the focus of a previous webinar. We're assuming that that's all happened.
Right.
And after that messy work and after being fairly organized, students, a class of students might have agreed that these were the 3 possible solutions, different solutions to Liz's magic V problems. And when we say different, we're thinking of that being the same, so to speak.
Yes.
But just to reiterate what Liz was saying, the total of this arm over here is the same as the total of this arm over here. So in both cases here, the totals are 8. Here, the totals are 9. And here, the totals are 10. And if I was to swap these two numbers with these two numbers, for example, we would think of them as the same magic V, which is why we're going to assume that the class would have agreed that these are the only 3 different ones. These totals of 8, these have got arms with a total of 9, and these got arms with a totals of 10.
Yeah. Okay. So having got to this point, Charlie, as Charlie says, a lot of work has gone on already. We may have recorded this on the board. And so what kind of things do you think you and your fellow classmates might have noticed, Charlie?
Okay, so we might notice, so this was using the numbers 1 to 5.
Okay, yeah.
And I suppose one of the things I notice is that the number at the bottom of the V is always odd.
Okay.
So the 1, the 3, the 5 have ended up at the bottom.
At the bottom, yeah.
And I suppose I might also notice that the totals end up being consecutive numbers. The 8, 9, and 10 are consecutive numbers.
Okay, interesting. So as mathematicians, at this point, it seems a real shame if we leave it there. I mean, we've done some interesting mathematics, but we've only done one context. And mathematics is all about looking to the general, making more generalizations. So we'd like to turn this to you now. In the chat, we wonder whether you could post anything that occurs to you, perhaps some wonderings, based on what we have here. So these are you know, we're imagining that these are the magic bees we have come up with. What questions are bubbling up for you? What do you wonder? Don't really want to say too much more than that, but please could you post your suggestions on the chat? We'll give you a few minutes to do that. Thank you very much for your contributions, all of which are absolutely valid. Now, what many of you have phrased, well, I think all of you, is because I asked for some questions. So what we're doing here is we're asking some questions that occur to us as a result of what we're already seeing. Charlie, I think if I was, I like to think of making a conjecture as kind of articulating what I think might happen. So I guess these questions are doing that to some extent, but they aren't necessarily identifying what I think might happen, but they are the initial stages of conjecturing, because I'm beginning to question and I'm wondering.
And it would be easier to come up with conjectures if we'd had a conversation about how do we convince ourselves that the three solutions that we have displayed at present are indeed the only three possible solutions. Because there might have been conversations about odds and even numbers, there might have been conversations about how one goes about organizing the numbers, testing possibilities, and so on.
Yeah. So somebody in the chat has wondered about what if you had 2 odd numbers and 3 even numbers. So I guess I might, for example, when I've used this task with learners in the past, Charlie, something that they have said is, I think that if I had numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 instead, I think that we're going to need an even number at the bottom.
Okay, well, we can test that out.
So I think one of the really important ideas about conjecturing is that, as we were saying, it's expressing what you think is going to happen based on what you already know. So we're very keen to encourage students to express their ideas as a conjecture and not be worried about uncertainty. So it's not that I can't make a wrong conjecture Charlie, can I? If I am using the evidence in front of me and thinking about what will happen, I may need to test out my ideas though, and maybe that will affect my conjecture, but let's see. Okay, so here we are, numbers 2 to 6 instead.
And again, I'm not spending a lot of time playing around with this
No,
because obviously I know the problem quite well.
yeah,
And the reason for doing this is not to get to know magic V's very well, but instead it is to be thinking about conjectures and generalizing.
right, yeah.
And actually, it's possibly easier to start conjecturing once we've got more examples. So we had
Yes.
the example with the numbers 1 to 5,
That's right.
and now we have examples with 2 to 6.
Okay.
So I think I've got this right. I noticed that some people were talking about the number at the top of the arm and so on.
Yes, yes.
And I suppose one thing I'd say is, if I take, for example, this magic V here, it doesn't really matter whether I put 6 at the top of the left arm or 2.
No,
Um,
it
so,
remains unchanged.
and likewise there.
Yeah.
So talking about whereas for this arrangement, I can't change the 4. So that is why that became important.
Okay.
So yes, we can be thinking about these arms and here we have we had before we had totals of 8, 9, and 10.
That's right.
And here we have totals of 11, 12, and 13.
Right.
So actually, it might be easier to start making conjectures now, having seen 2 complete examples.
Yeah.
So, shall we give everyone a chance to post some conjectures?
Please do.
In the spirit that a conjecture cannot be wrong.
Right.
On the evidence, based on the evidence so far, what do you think might happen?
Yes.
Conjectures might need modifying later on.
Yep.
But we're trying to capture something that's sort of general. So what you said earlier, Liz, after doing the first magic V, we'd solve the problem in a way, and we could just walk away and do a different problem.
Away. Yeah.
But by delving a bit deeper, going a bit wider, we're getting a window into a sort of a world of magic Vs.
Yes.
That will encourage mathematical conversations, which may have to do with, well, in this case in particular, I imagine something to do with odds and evens will crop up quite often and will be really valuable.
Absolutely.
But also, the more we do it, I know you and I can create magic Vs quite efficiently, even if the numbers are 412, 413, 414, 415, and 416.
Yeah.
And we can create a magic V for any given total that is given to us. So.
Which is, it sounds amazing, doesn't it? I mean, not because, I hasten to add, not because we are brilliant, but because we have got the insight into the structure, that generality, which allows us to apply what we're learning to every context, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is why it's worth spending a bit of time on the generality.
Okay. Do post your conjectures. So, along the lines of, I think that's whatever. So we'll be quiet for a moment while you do that, now that you've had 2 examples. thank you once again. In a classroom situation, I think, Charlie, we would imagine that perhaps we'd been giving students time to work in pairs, to come up with some conjectures. We might then, as the teacher, maybe we would write up conjectures on the board. And at this point, of course, there are a lot of conjectures in the mix, but that's okay. And we would encourage you then to allow students time to explore the conjecture that they wish to by testing out examples, refining their conjecture if necessary. If perhaps, for example, they find what we might call a counter example, so an example which refutes one of the conjectures that has gone on the board, they could write that up so that the whole class are aware. And then I guess as the teacher, Charlie, you'd be moving around the room, you'd be listening into what students are saying, and you'd be perhaps encouraging them to be prepared to report back on the conjecture they've been working on and what they've done to test their ideas. Would you agree?
Yes, and in our guidance, we talked about Alf Coles have something called common boards,
That's right, yeah.
which allow students to share discoveries as they go along without having to wait for a plenary session.
Right.
So I think he was getting his students to put things on post-its, for example.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of writing things on a whiteboard and students coming up and saying, oh, yes, I agree, I've tested it with this, or, oh, I found a counterexample, right. Or I think this needs qualifying.
Yes.
It works here, but it doesn't work there.
Yes.
It just feels like a really mathematical way of working in a collaborative way, and in a way we sort of talk about a community, classroom becoming a community of mathematicians.
Right.
So not everyone would necessarily be working on the same conjecture.
That's right.
There would be several conjectures written on the board, and some people have been writing about what happens if the first number is even, or what happens if this or that, and students can choose which conjectures, and perhaps add new conjectures as they go along.
Yes, absolutely. Because as you said, once we had more examples, more conjectures might occur.
Yes.
Yeah.
You get to know the problem better.
You do. Okay. So I think we're going to stop the magic bees problem there, Charlie. Are you happy we do that? So if you think about the phase that we talked about earlier, the 5 phases, if you like, we would then if we can't if all the examples that we're finding are confirming our conjecture, then is the time to think about how we might visualize or represent the mathematical idea, which would then help us move into our reasoning and proving stage. But we're not going to do that. That's next time. Well, the first part, visualizing, representing, is next webinar. So join us for that. Charlie, shall we do another task?
Yes.
This task involves an interactivity on NRICH. So I'm going to stop sharing the visualizer, and instead I'm going to go back to browser. Okay. So in a similar way to Magic Bees, we're not going to give you any time to get into the mathematics of this task, but we're going to talk you through where we might have got to in a classroom situation. Some of you may know this game. So this game is called Got It. We're taking it in turns with the computer to add either a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4 on, and the winner is the person who reaches 23 exactly. So Charlie, let's imagine a situation where as a class we've been working on this game, and we've got to the stage where we've developed a strategy for beating the computer at this game. I wonder if you could talk us through what you might do, or show us, demonstrate.
So I'm sort of the classroom representative, and we might have spent a whole lesson before we got to this.
Absolutely.
There's been a lot of messy work involved where we've lost and lost again and again and again. But one of the insights we might have gained at fairly early stage, perhaps, is that whenever the total got to 18, if the computer got to the total of 18, then the computer would beat us.
Right.
Because from 18, we couldn't get to 23.
Can't get to 23, no.
But then, irrespective of whether we added 1, 2, 3, or 4, the computer would piggyback on our number.
Yeah.
And once we realized that,
Mhm.
that was really helpful to figure out what we should do. And eventually we started, perhaps as a class, thinking about what are the crucial stepping stones.
Yep.
And I've memorized the stepping stones.
Ooh,
So
good.
I think if I land on 3 to start with,
Okay.
and I don't make any mistakes, I'm guaranteed a win.
Right.
So here we go. I'm going to
Over to you. So the
land
computer
on
is
3.
computer's chosen 1 to make 4.
Okay, I'm going to choose 4 because I want to land on 8.
Okay. Computer's turn. Computer's chosen 1 again to make 9.
Okay, I'm going to choose 4 again,
Mhm.
and I'm going to land on 13.
Okay. Let's see what the computer does. Computer's chosen 2 this time, so you're on a total of 15.
So now I can land on 18
Nice.
if I choose 3.
Yes. So now the computer can't get to 23. Let's see what the computer does. It's chosen to choose 2.
And I'm going to choose 3.
Nice. Okay, Charlie. So like we said before, I mean, this feels quite satisfying. We could stop here.
We could.
We could, you know, this feel I can beat the computer. I can show my mum or dad at home how to beat the computer.
But mathematicians
Mhm.
would want to say, okay, what happens if I change the settings?
Okay.
What
Mhm.
happens if my target is not 23? I can
Mhm.
change the settings.
Mhm.
What
Mhm.
happens if instead of adding the numbers 1 to 4, I have numbers 1 to 7 or 1 to 10? Or
Yes.
what happens if the computer starts
Yes.
rather than me?
Yes.
And
It's this. I use the word power of maths, and I don't mean it in a hierarchical way, but that it's that, like we had with magic V's, when you said we'd be able to find a magic V any 5 consecutive numbers we were given. This feels, you know, how powerful mathematics can be. If I can find a way to win at this game, no matter what the target and my range of numbers.
and there's a chance that I've done a lot of messy work.
Yeah.
And having worked out the strategy for this,
Yeah.
I think I can piggyback on those ideas
Yeah.
to then start finding more general strategies.
Yes.
So that
Yes.
I can win in sort of more generally, whatever
Right.
the target,
Right.
whatever the numbers.
Right. So I think this is what John Mason would call going from the particular to the general, Charlie. Yes, using this particular example. So the computer having the target at 23 with our 1 to 4 range. We've sussed this, but now we're going to use this as a springboard to do more general, to generalize. So having seen that, Charlie's strategy for beating the computer here, I wonder if you could please post some conjectures that you might have. So, you know, I think that what might happen if,
Which focus on the general rather than on
Yeah.
the specific example that we've been working on.
thank you for clarifying, Charlie, that'd be brilliant. Let's give you a few moments to post. Thank you for your contributions, really interesting. And as I say, you know, no conjectures can be wrong. Charlie, when I've used this, I mean, both of us have used this game a lot with children. And quite often, this idea of winning the game is a real motivating factor. And having seen this, I think, and I know that children often say, well, you know, if I start the game, I'm always going to win. So my conjecture is that if I start the game, I can beat the computer. So if a student said that, what might we do as a teacher?
Okay, so of course, one would give them an opportunity to test out ideas. Yeah. This would be one of the conjectures that's up on the board, and they could test this out. If they carry on being convinced, I might say, well, I want to play against the computer, and I want to say change my target. I'm going to go for a target of 16.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for the numbers 1 to 3, and I'm going to let the computer start.
I think you need to check. Blue. I think that's right. That's true.
Okay.
Okay. So the computer's starting, right? Computer chose 1.
I'm going to choose 3.
Okay. So that's 4. The computer's chosen 2 to make 6.
I'm going to choose 2.
We're now on 8. The computer's chosen 2 again to make 10.
I'm going to choose 2 again.
Which makes 12. Ooh, target of 16, huh? Computer's chosen 1 to make 13. Interesting, Charlie.
So there's an opportunity of offering a counter example where I've managed to win despite the computer start. Yeah. And the computer, it's understood, always has the most efficient strategy.
Yes.
And can only be beaten if we use the same strategy. So here's another nice example of how conjectures need modifying.
Yeah.
So sometimes it is better to start, but sometimes it's better to let the computer start. And so it's the same problem that we started with, but it feels like the first problem gives you like a window into it, but we want, I know that we talk about low threshold, high ceiling, but somebody that I work with talks about low threshold, high ceiling, wide walls. Yeah. And it's almost like from a distance, you just see something, but then you poke your head through the window and a whole vista of possibilities. And we want to explore and understand the structure. I mean, the icon that we've got for conjecture and generalizing is a little bit of a staircase, a sort of outdoors spirally staircase. And we put it there because one sees just a little bit and one conjectures that it keeps going up and it goes down all to the ground floor, and that it goes somewhere, and even though we can't see it all, there's enough of the structure for us to be able to make conjectures about the whole thing. And we want students to be curious. So we hope that the activities are sufficiently interesting that they're curious to want to know more.
Using something else that I think it's Anne Watson rather than John, but she talks about harnessing children's natural powers, doesn't she? Which is exactly really what you've just said. Our inclination, and young children are curious. They want to know. They ask questions based on what they've observed and predict what might happen.
And she also talks about making the private public.
Yeah, that's
so you're sitting. Our students may be sitting in the classroom and they may be wondering something. And we need to give them the opportunity to make that wondering a public, both public, but also valued that, oh, that's an interesting question, let's work on it. Yes. Or, you know, if that's of interest to you, you can work on that conjecture. And getting the language of conjectures where you can't be right or wrong. This is, oh, this I think is what might happen. Exactly. And then later on you might modify.
That's right. So
we've written guidance.
We have indeed. So what we'd like to share with you now is we've had a look at 2 tasks to give you a flavour of what we mean by conjecturing and generalising in those contexts. We'd like to share with you now where you can find the sort of more substantial guidance that we've written. If I go, I'll just stick in the same browser. Some of you may be participating today because you've recently become a problem-solving school. And we're gathering all our resources together here. As you can also access them via the primary teacher homepage that I showed you earlier. But if another way to do it is through the problem solving schools page. So if I click on problem solving schools and I scroll down, and on the right hand side here, there's this box at resources and professional development. And you can see here, we have linked the guidance that we've written previously with recordings of our previous webinars. And if we scroll down, here we have our most recent guidance about conjecturing and generalising. So this page here, I'll click on in one moment, is where we have pulled together some guidance. But I really want to make sure I don't forget to say that we've also pulled together some lists of tasks which we think will offer students opportunities to conjecture and generalise. So as I said at the beginning, we're only working on a couple today, but do take a look at these, and they're gathered into year group lists. So we hope you find those useful. But let's have a look at the guidance that we've put together. Now, I'm just going to skip the top for a moment, but just to draw your attention to the fact the 2 tasks that we've worked on today, we've actually exemplified a little bit in this guidance as well. So we've used these boxes to indicate, just as we did earlier, this is where you might have got to with a class. Here are some initial conjectures. After doing some more testing, some more work, these are the kind of modified conjectures that students might make. So the magic bees example, and I'm going to scroll down. We've got several examples here, but we've also done a similar thing for Got It. So do take a look at those. And
we put links to the problems at the top.
Absolutely.
And actually, we've also encouraging you, if you're looking at this and you haven't seen the problem before,
yeah,
we're encouraging you to just have a go at the problem before looking at the conjectures and the modified conjectures, which sort of give away quite a lot. They tend to be the generalizations
yes,
that will later need sort of proving.
Exactly. So, so that's all towards the bottom of the page. So, where we've exemplified what we mean using a range of NRICH tasks suitable for different age groups.
Yeah, starting with primary and slowly working
up.
But there's nothing to stop you working on any of them for
yourself.
Yes.
Now, in terms of the written guidance we've put at the top, we've tried to structure this in a similar way to the guidance we wrote for exploring and noticing. So we are offering you sort of NRICH's values and ethos to begin with, and because we hold these values, this will affect the structural considerations in our classrooms, which then inform the nitty-gritty of those interactions that you might have. So that's the way we've structured the guidance. What we are offering you here are ideas to think about. So we're not saying that, we have the magic recipe, follow this recipe, everything will happen. But these are ideas for you to think about in your school. If in a primary school, perhaps during a staff meeting, all of you thinking together. If you're a subject leader, then you may take a lead on that yourself. But we like to think of this guidance as being discussed with your colleagues and thought about over the coming months. So you've had chance to think particularly about, for example, today, conjecturing and generalising, before you then hopefully come to our next webinar to think about the next stage of the process.
When we may revisit some of the problems that we've looked at before and try and explain or convince or justify or prove some of the generalizations that we've conjectured. This
right. So we're not going to read out this guidance now, but let's think about some of the, the key points. And I think this paragraph here in our introduction is key, and one that we've alluded to already. So usually, I think in classrooms, or not, usually is the wrong word to use. Often in classrooms, students go from, a problem to another problem, to another problem, to another problem. What we're offering here is a slightly different model. So rather than going, from one to another, we're suggesting from going to, a question to a question, but then to the general. And this goes back to your little analogy of the window, Charlie, I think. So in terms of the values and ethos, Charlie has already mentioned that this idea that, you know, being uncertain is not something to be embarrassed about, and we really want all students to feel comfortable expressing conjectures, and we have a belief that everyone can conjecture, which is really important. Charlie, would you like to say anything? But I don't want to take over. Did you want to say anything about structural considerations, or are you?
I suppose structural considerations are sort of big picture decisions that teachers make often and inform a lot of what goes on in their classrooms. So it might be the kind of problems that are being used in the class in lessons need to allow for exploration, some systematic work that then leads to conjecturing, in the expectation that there'll be some results that need explaining and then proving. So there are problems that will fit into that structure. Having common boards is a structural consideration. Having boards where students can share their ideas, where students can comment on each other's ideas. When you and I were in school as students, I suspect the work that we did was incredibly private.
Very much.
And only the teacher ever saw what we wrote or what we thought. Well, I'm not sure they knew very much about what we thought, but this is a structure consideration. How do we make it possible for students to share ideas? And it might involve how we organize our tables and the seating and the like.
So in terms of facilitating these interactions, what we've done here is offer you some suggestions for questions and prompts which you could use to help you encourage students to conjecture and generalize. And the aim is that initially, if they're not used to this, they will need your prompts, but gradually we've come across, well, you come across, I shouldn't take credit for this phrase, scaffolding and fading, but if we ask the questions in the first place, gradually we will find we don't need to ask those questions as frequently, because the students will begin to ask them themselves. And quite a nice way of doing that is, as we were saying earlier, you know, what would a mathematician ask in this moment? But also rather nice, it's again a John Mason and Watson thing, you know, the teacher asking, what do you think I'm going to ask you next? Which is quite nice, I think, cueing students in to being able to question themselves. I'm aware of the time.
Models the kind of conversations and questions that mathematicians, so if classrooms and schools are going to induct children into thinking and working like mathematicians, we need to expose them to the kind of questions that mathematicians ask themselves. And so the scaffolding we offer by asking these questions, and the fading comes into, we want the students to ask these questions for themselves in the long run.
That's right. So that's a sort of a whistle-stop tour of our guidance, which we hope you will find useful. We are rapidly coming towards the end of the session, so I'm not sure we've got time for another task, Charlie. Would you agree, or shall we? So I
don't think we have time.
No.
But I think one thing that we haven't mentioned is that though we have focused on the thinking journey, going from exploring to proving and going to the conjecturing and passing through the conjecturing phase in the middle, we've chosen, or you've chosen, these two tasks because there is some content that we would want students to be thinking about and engaging in. So with the Magic V's, I hope I'm not giving too much away here, but actually the number of even numbers and the number of odd numbers is crucial in terms of thinking about why certain things happen.
That's right.
And with Magic V's, I mean, we know that if the target is 42 million,
got it.
we've got it. If the target is 42,612,492, and we can use the numbers 1 to 4, I know that if I start with 2, I can win. And it's got something to do with numbers, it's something to do with remainders,
Yes.
something to do with factors and multiples. So even though we focused on the thinking,
Yeah.
there is content
That's right.
here
That's
that is
right.
being addressed at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think we try always, and especially the problems in our mapping document, are good because there is content,
Yep.
and you'll see what it is on the mapping document, as well as challenge to students to think mathematically.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, thank you for saying that, Charlie. So I think we hope that has whet your appetite. We hope that you enjoy conjecturing and generalising with your students. Charlie, would you mind just popping up to the Problem Solving Schools page just one more time to remind everybody where these resources are? So Problem Solving Schools, and then on the right-hand side, the resources and professional development. And hopefully tomorrow, if I'm organised enough, the webinar recording will be linked on our guidance page at the top. And then you've got those groups of tasks to hopefully give you some ideas about how to go about giving students those opportunities. We have one.
I suppose there might, is it worth also saying that if this is the first webinar you've been to,
Good idea, yes.
Then you might want to watch the webinars to do with exploring and noticing, working systematically, so that if you come to our next one or our next two,
you've got the thread.
You've got all five, and have a sort of sense of what the journey is that many of us go through when we are faced with a new problem or a new context, something interesting that may lead to some interesting mathematical discussions.
That's right. Thanks, Charlie. So the final thing to say, I think, well, I've got two things to say. First of all, please do give us your feedback. Now, I haven't been keeping an eye on the chat, which is very naughty. I don't know whether Ems has posted a link to the chat. I'm hoping that if I do this, I can, to everybody. Thank you very much, Charlie. I think that's a link to the feedback form. We would really love to have your feedback. Hot off the press, we have also got some challenges over the summer for your students. So we've decided to publish them now so that you've got some time to let families know. If you go to NRICH.math.org/summer-2024, we've gathered together tasks appropriate for different age groups that are suitable, that particularly lend themselves to working on at home, perhaps with friends or family members. So do let your, the families that you work with know about these. They are published now and they will remain published. Well, they won't ever go away. So please share those. If students work on them, they can compare their solutions with published solutions that we have on the page as well. Eventually, hopefully in the next couple of days, we will also put a link to those up in this top blue box on our menu, so it'll make it really easy to find.
Yes, we've published summer challenges now for many, many years, but they've often been published sort of the first week in the holiday or the last week of term. And we thought that if you knew about them early enough, you might, and you have a newsletter going out to parents or some information on your school website, why not, along with the music department that publicizes its concerts and the drama department that publicizes its plays and the PE department who publicizes athletics day, we can have a maths department publicizing their summer challenges. So that is why we're including them this early on.
That's right. That's right. So thank you all. It's time to go now, but we really appreciate you working with us this afternoon, and we hope to see you again at our next webinar, which in fact is not until October, but we look forward to that. Thank you very much indeed.
And if you're living in the Northern Hemisphere, have a good summer.
Absolutely.
And if you're living in the Southern Hemisphere, have a good winter.